Hello again everyone, and welcome back to the Underground. So today we're going to be taking a look at a very specific topic on small UAS systems and different camouflage techniques and tactics that you can use to hide from them. So camouflage itself is not a new topic, but recent events, more specifically this conflict, the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, have catapulted small UAS systems into the spotlight once again. And this is not a concept, this is not something that has been, that is new either, but during the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, small UAS systems were a very decisive tool. Whatever you want to call the war, we call it the Lawnmower War, because one of the main reasons and tools that were used in that conflict, which lasted only 6 weeks long, was UAS systems. You had Armenia and Azerbaijan both using small UAS systems in conjunction with modern day tools, modern warfare. Things like guided, munitions, precision weapons, or even artillery, right? So that sort of stuff, combined with small UAS systems using other modern war tools, has been a wake-up call for a lot of people. Now, those of us in the defense industry have known about this for a while, and really the defense industry as a whole really started getting very serious about researching these small UAS systems back in 2018, and actually long before that, but most doctrine was essentially finalized in 2018. We've known about it for, probably 10 years before that, back going all the way back to 2008. But the main point is that small UAS systems have been used by insurgent groups for a very long time, most notably ISIS, and this is where our sort of experience comes in with them. UAS systems for the longest time have been regarded as sort of like a range toy, for lack of a better term. The Taliban really didn't use them in Afghanistan. They still haven't to this day really used them at all. You've got some limited use of them, attacking airfields, like down in Helmand and things like that. But it really has just been, UAS 1 or 2 attacks a year. And even those aren't confirmed at all. I don't think there actually is a confirmed case of a UAS system being used to target something in Afghanistan. I think the first one was last year, actually, now that I think about it. But anyway, I'm sure someone will comment below with that actual data. But the point is that Afghanistan is very different than Iraq and Syria, and ISIS in Iraq and Syria used drones like the DJI Phantom quite extensively, and they not only use them for observation, but they use them for targeting. They had, the ability to remotely drop warheads, mortars, hand grenades, and all do this with multiple drones at the same time, and then also have another drone overhead to videotape the whole thing for propaganda. So, a few years ago, the defense community said, whoa, this stuff that's no longer a range toy. These things are killing people. And I think one of the main turning points was when a drone was able to drop a hand grenade into an ammunition dump, and that was being used by government forces, the local government forces there, local military, and that was a wake-up call, because that video was circulated all over the internet. I'm sure you can look it up and find it, of essentially a football stadium or a cricket stadium imploding on itself because a small hand grenade was dropped in there into an ammunition dump. So that was when the world started noticing that these small UAS systems are huge. And as such, a lot of doctrine has come out lately. We have stuff like the Islamic State and Drones by, Don Rassler there, come out in 2018. We even had updates to joint publication 3TAC01, countering air missile threats. That was updated to talk a little bit about these UAS systems, or at least allude to it. And then most importantly, we have consumer grade or user grade, or, in the trenches viewpoints. We have actual soldiers who are concerned about these things on the front lines, as it were, writing about these in blog posts and unit level tactics and training and stuff like this. And this is why this topic has become sort of reignited. And one of the reasons that we're doing this series now is because now we can freely talk about a lot of this stuff in the open. And one of the great things that has come out of the Marine Corps Intelligence School down there in Dam Neck, Virginia, great place, highly recommend going there. One of the things they have done is create a camouflage SOP for the Marine Corps. And it's very interesting. It's a very short guide. It takes a very sharp it takes a very different viewpoint than most military doctrine. I'm sure those of you out there that have been in the military can remember making flashcards to pass some kind of either advancement exam or some kind of soldier board or whatever, studying all this doctrine, flipping through field manuals that are just boring, and just really mind-numbingly boring stuff, just to remember some kind of random statistic that's never going to freaking help you on the battlefield. Well, the Marine Corps intelligence folks created this guide with a different viewpoint. So a lot of people have been aware that camouflage as a entity has been around for a long time, like I've said. In fact, it's been around for like hundreds of years, like I mentioned, but really we started to be concerned about it in warfare when aircraft started being used for warfare for the very first time. So this is a screenshot from a training video from 1941 showing soldiers how to camouflage things, and also really just the importance of camouflage as a tactic in war. And that has been around, like I said, for a very, very long time. The basics of camouflage have not changed. The earth, the way that you interact with the earth and how you can hide in a natural environment has really been the same since humans have been on this planet, right? Dirt isn't purple, it's brown. It's been brown for 100 years. We know this. And, camouflage, the techniques and materials have been upgraded, but the general principles remain the same. However, we can note that even though the basics haven't changed, and you can quite literally get a field manual from the U.S. Army, or any army in the world really, back from World War II, or even World War I, when they started to recognize the importance of camouflage. But you could grab a field manual from World War II. Look at that training film from 1941, and the principles have not changed. It's still applicable to this day, and it is vital. Now, here's the thing. Just because it hasn't changed any does not mean that people do it, right? It's just like the whole simple versus complex argument, right? Just because a problem is simple does not mean that it isn't very difficult, right? So, swimming across the Atlantic is fairly straightforward. You go to the beach and you look towards the ocean, get a compass bearing, and you just swim, right? Well, that's pretty straightforward. It's almost impossible to do, though, right? So, that's something to keep in mind, is that these basics haven't changed, and so we can rephrase the basics. We can create this brand new cool product. But really the basics haven't really changed that much, so we can just make it more palatable to more people. So one of the things that was done was there were several different exercises that we can publicly talk about when it comes to camouflage detection. And this is a screenshot from one of these after-action reports talking about how this particular unit was very ill-equipped for camouflage. So let's go through this after-action report, and we'll talk about some of these images, and we'll talk about what it means for camouflage, but also how to adapt that sort of thing to a civilian atmosphere, right? Because not a whole lot of us are concerned about ISIS dropping a mortar on our head with a DJI Phantom. However, we are greatly concerned about maybe our local law enforcement using a drone to observe things, right? Or maybe, the military using a drone or something like that. That, for whatever reason, good or bad, right? People are concerned about that. So we wanted to talk about those concerns by using an actual doctrine product. It's really good. So yeah, like I said, these screenshots show that this is, from a Raven or a DJI Phantom, type small UAS system, and this shows that, these vehicles had made really no attempt, other than getting off the road, they've made no attempt at really camouflaging themselves. They're easily seen. And in this next image, Like this is a company-sized element. They have made absolutely no attempt to try to camouflage themselves. Not only have they erected tarps on the surface, but they've parked their vehicles right in the middle of the road, right at an intersection of roads. There's no camouflage netting anywhere in sight, and they've lined up their packs so that as an analyst, if I see this image, now I know that that's a company-sized element because I can count all the individual rucksacks there. So we could probably spend an hour dissecting this one image and show exactly what was done wrong here. But honestly, we're not in the business of going down the TTPs for a military unit. Like, we are not military doctrine writers, right? We're trying to help ordinary people, right? So what does this mean to us? Well, it means that a lot of that doctrine has been thrown out with a lot of different buzzwords. And a lot of people will recognize these words from, like I said, exams or soldier boards or whatever. You know, size, shape, color, shadow, shine, contrast, texture, movement. Those different buzzwords are used to describe different ways to conceal things, different methods of concealment. You can use a whole bunch of words to say essentially the same thing, and really that's what the doctrine is trying to get away from. Instead of memorizing a sort of acronym, instead of memorizing a page document, really this document, this PDF that the Marine Corps put out, the Intel Weenies over there, the document they put out kind of goes against that. And it's really just a list of 8 simple things. You don't have to memorize this. There's no really big buzzwords, right? It's just, hey, if you do these 8 things, this will be your 80% solution. And that's what we're going to go over today. We're going to go over this list of 8 different things that you can do to prevent your detection from a small UAS system. So they also came up with standards, and that's really what more or less half the document is if you read into it. And the standards are, look, we're not going to do this whole thing where we talk about learning objectives and like, this is what you learned. Did you not learn this? This is the standard, quoting some kind of random field manual that nobody cares about. This is basically saying, hey, this is what you need to do, and this is what every Marine needs to be able to do. And it's very simple language, right? It's like, you know, all Marines need to be able to know how to camouflage your helmet, you know, that sort of stuff. It's really simple, and that is one of the things that we like about this plan and this document, and why this document will most likely be talked about, but not by more people than just us, really. So let's go down this list of things, and we'll talk about some of the screenshots within, you know, other AARs, and talk about, you know, how they apply to a civilian. So first up is this image. Now, this is quite an obvious image. This looks like either sunset or sunrise, probably sunset, and you can see shadows very long. These vehicles are very, very close together, these labs. And you can see at the bottom of the screen they have the UAS operators. They're not camouflaged at all. They're just laying down in the bush, but their camouflage uniforms don't match with the area they're in, so they're kind of obvious. Now, the point with this very first one is, imagine taking these 2 labs. So you take this one right here, and you take it and you move it off screen a little bit. Well, this image that you're looking at, this is the field of view for this drone, this particular asset. So if you move things away, you make it harder for the same 2 vehicles to be seen in the same shot. So like right here, this is a very photogenic thing. You can get 2 vehicles right there next to each other. But if you move them apart from each other, you disperse them, it makes it harder to count, and your sensor can only look at one at a time. So that's something that's very, very important. Also, what's important is really the term dispersion, what it was used for and created as a concept really since artillery was issued, is what if a mortar round lands right there? What if an artillery round lands right there? That would take out both vehicles quite easily, and that's no good. So dispersing for a warfare type thing may mean dispersing to prevent everybody from getting killed all at once by some kind of artillery munition or a bomb or something. But really, dispersion when it comes to civilian sector is, hey, if you spread far enough apart, they can't see 2 people in the same frame, so in the same, you know, field of view of the drone, unless they're using something like some kind of other sensor that I'm not sure we can probably talk about, like a Gorgon stare type thing. But the issue with this is that they're not dispersed, they're right next to each other. So that's why the first rule is to disperse into multiple small elements and displace often. That's just a key thing. Dispersion, you know, dispersing yourselves dispersing your people is very, very crucial. And this is where it comes to, once again, the civilian factor. People who aren't trained are going to have a hard time with this. If you're telling me that, hey, I'm getting shot at and I need to go, on my own 100 feet that way, people are going to have, a huge psychological effect. And that's where the civilian sector comes in. So, it's scary for troops to be in a foxhole 100 feet away from your buddy, your battle buddy, and, you start getting mortar rounds. That's pretty scary for people who aren't experienced to that. And it is terrifying for civilians, if it ever came to that. So the psychological impact of dispersion is something that has to be factored in as well, and you have to train around it, right? Also, another thing to consider is that we learned from the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict is that in modern war, vehicles are going to offer a false sense of comfort. I can't tell you how sobering it was to watch these armored vehicles just get hammered and just peeled apart like a tin can because some off-the-wall, cheap, less than 50-pound drone was overhead and putting a laser spot on it for precision-guided munition. That was terrifying to watch, and I'm sure it was terrifying for a lot of people who have been on the receiving end of some of those weapons before. So it's very sobering is that we think that, hey, even the military gets the idea of, staying in a vehicle is cover. Not anymore, unless you can conceal that vehicle. A lot of modern munitions can punch right through a lot of that stuff. So, that's just something to consider. For civilians, get out of your vehicle because there's no way a civilian vehicle can be camouflaged to the efficiency that a military vehicle can. So that's something to consider. Up next is this next one. This one is a pretty big one. You can see these are, UAS operators again. These guys, I think we're doing some kind of tongue-in-cheek game where they were trying to doing some training exercises where they're trying to find their enemy UAS operators, and they did. And now they're in a report that the whole internet is reading. But they made no attempt to hide here. They didn't get off the road. There's shadows everywhere. There's all kinds of stuff. They stick out like a sore thumb. So, what if we were to give them some camouflage? So if we give them some tarps, we put them on, put some adequate camouflage that matches their background on the hoods. We put some here on the side to take out those shadows, put one here on the other side as well. And then we put them working underneath the camouflage net. They disappear. Even in the middle, of the open terrain, they're going to disappear quite easily. So that's why number 2 is to find a concealed site and conform to the terrain. Use the terrain to your advantage, like everybody has ever been taught when it comes to camouflage. But one of the things that is hard for people to recognize, and this is why the U.S. military gets hit with this all the time, is do not stop in the open. And for civilians, it's a lot easier than the military because, as the military likes to joke, roughly 99% of the time is spent sitting around, waiting, wondering what the hell the holdup is. So that is a huge security thing. If you're going to stop and you're going to stop for more than, say, 10 seconds, prepare to stop for 30 minutes or more. I cannot tell you how many times all of us here have either been in convoys or seen convoys that just stop on the road in like the worst possible place to stop, the most obvious place for an ambush. It's just horrible the way that logistics work sometimes. So if you have any control over this at all, and civilians obviously do, if you have to stop your vehicle in the open, camouflage it as best you can. Throw a cami net over it. That's better than not. Civilian vehicles are made to be shiny, right? So there's no matte color on any civilian vehicle that comes out of a normal car lot, right? So having some kind of cover for that car is devastatingly effective, especially when you're looking for a shiny car. You don't see a shiny car, you tend to move on. Now, if you can't do that, if you cannot camouflage your vehicle, stop your vehicle, if you're going to be stopped for a period of time, don't get out and stand right next to the vehicle like these guys were doing. Move off site, move away, preferably out of danger close range of whatever munition is coming at you. And if you're a civilian and you're not so much worried about, your local sheriff department dropping grenades on you or something like that, If you're worried about being observed, get away from your vehicle. Even just stepping offline, off the line of your vehicle, away from the road, 100 feet with the right camouflage can work wonders. So that's something to keep in mind too, is to make sure that if you're going to stop when you can hide, essentially. Another thing to keep in mind is nighttime. Being able to resist thermal traffic. And this image shows a dismounted company walking along a road because they forgot that at night there's this thing called thermal variation, and the road is going to be quite considerably warmer still than the human body, or colder depending on your area. I think in this particular image it was colder. The road was cold, and the leaves and the foliage around were hot for the day. So they were quite easily seen. Now, if you take all those people right there that are on that road, you move them off into offline, just off to the side of the road a little bit, and they disappear. So people tend to have a very predator-like view of thermal imaging, and thermal imaging, it can be easily thwarted, but it really depends on what kind of sensor you're up against and what kind of materials you have, and really the environment also matters as well. So basically everything matters. The point is that the U.S. military is trying to get into the mentality of get back into a peer versus peer, a near peer adversarial conflict, right? We have spent decades learning how to fight insurgents with an AK and 5 rounds in the magazine. We've spent decades trying to figure out how to fight that and honing our skills on that. And we haven't, other than the usual NTC rotation or deployment to Poland or something like that, we haven't really been focused on a war with like China, which is why the Commandant of the Marine Corps and a lot of the Marine Corps staff have come up with new plans for things like reducing tanks and all that kind of stuff, which you can read about on your own. The point of that digression is to say that, look, in foreign countries, yes, the United States military owns the night. It is very hard to use sensors to your advantage in other countries. But in America, we have this thing called citizenship. And that citizenship allows us to buy things that are ITAR controlled. Things like FLIR sensors, things like night vision goggles. Like right now, you can go buy night vision goggles that are better than the ones used by roughly 99.99% of the military. And a lot of people do. There's a lot of private companies out there that do that. And that stuff's kind of going away. Like we had a whole episode on protected technology and how that technology is going to go away because the military has realized that here at home, they don't have the advantage. They don't necessarily own the night anymore. They rent it. And, the ability to, I can't tell you how many people rely on infrared lasers to call in helicopters. Well, if you've got night vision goggles, you can see everything. But if you don't have night vision goggles, you can't see anything. So a lot of our infrastructure is built around fighting, people in the desert with no technology. But at home, we have that benefit of technology. So use it if you've got it. If you have night vision goggles, there you go. You can more easily come to the later steps that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. And up next is having the right set of camouflage. And this is something that not a whole lot of people tend to grasp, or they instinctively know, but they don't really know. They don't really follow it. So rule number 4 is, or guideline number 4 is, camouflage everything, blend with your surroundings. This is like a no-duh statement if I have ever seen one. But the thing is that your camouflage has to actually work. So like here in this particular image, these guys were doing the right thing. Like, God bless them. They were trying. They didn't park in the middle of the field. They parked off in the shadow, or what was the shadow of a tree. They're parked in such a way they've got their cami net out and everything. But, God bless them, their cami net's the wrong color. So if we were to help them out a little bit here by grabbing a piece of that foliage and terrain and then moving it right over to cover them up, guess what? They disappear instantly. If they had the right color, they would be invisible, right? So for the civilian sector, this matters a lot because I think that especially nowadays we tend to want to go for these Gucci camouflages. You know, I remember when multicam came out and everybody wanted it because you couldn't buy it because it was this thing called W2 Scorpion, and it was like this brand new camouflage that was so cool, right? And you know, same thing with the NWUs for the Navy. They came out with that guacamole colored camouflage that the Navy SEALs were using or claimed to use, and everybody loved it, and so everybody wanted it, but they couldn't buy it because it was proprietary and things like that. So we tend to go after these Gucci camouflages, not necessarily because they work, but because they're cool. And I can tell you right now, in our area, multicam does not work. It shines just like the old UCP, grandma's couch camouflage. It does not work in our particular area, so we have to go with some old school stuff. Either M81 Woodland, which is now becoming its own Gucci camouflage, or, depending on what type of area you're in, maybe some Swedish stuff if you're up in the mountains, stuff like that. So use the camouflage that works for your area and not the stuff that's just Gucci and cool. If it's a camouflage that works, but it isn't quite sexy, use it, because it doesn't matter if it looks cool as long as it keeps you hidden. That's the goal of camouflage. So that's just something to keep in mind as well, is that don't necessarily buy camouflage because it's the next cool thing for everybody to use. Buy camouflage because it works. And then we come to this one, this is interesting because one of the AARs that we were using for this was an image that showed success. This showed an entire 60mm section of 10 Marines with their rucksacks and 2 tubes. They showed this as a great success. They were completely invisible. Well, here's the thing. We looked at this image and saw a failure. And the failure was this. We can look and see 2 tracks going everywhere. This is what we in the military or in the field really call a road. You can see the 2 tracks of a tracked vehicle moving through the area, and you can follow them. You can even find one over there on the side going around this little grove of trees. So the killer one is this one right here, going right to that grove of trees. Now, the one way to improve this position, if we're going to stay there for any period of time, is to get rid of that. So if we were to camouflage that, it looks like it's a grass or some kind of terrain. Camouflage those tracks. Now look what you've done. You've now made it look like that road doesn't exist. And the road from the left going to the top of the image also intersects with that same image, and it looks like you bypass that grove completely. So that is awesome. That's exactly what we want when it comes to that type of thing. Now, here's another consideration, mostly for the civilian sector as well, is that what if you have a SIGINT ellipse? Now, we haven't talked about SIGINT very much on this channel just yet. We have a video coming about SIGINT ellipses and how that whole process works, but suffice it to say the short version is that imagine a sensor on a drone or something picks up a signal coming from within this oblong shape called an ellipse. We don't know where the person was standing when they made that transmission, but the person could have been standing over here at this far end and made the transmission, or they could have been standing over here and made the transmission. We don't know, but we know it came from somewhere within this ellipse, right? So the chances are it's probably going to be from this area. And as an analyst, if I look at this ellipse, I'm going to say, aha, I know exactly where they were. They thought they were being sneaky, and they are transmitting from this little grove that ordinarily would have been bypassed. So that's why this next tactic is to minimize movement and minimize radio calls. We're going to have, we've already had we've had hours talking about SIGINT and stuff like that when it comes to, your local law enforcement's capabilities, and even some National Guard units capabilities. But we might have to talk about that a little bit more in depth. But the point is that MCON, emissions control is a huge thing. It does not matter how well you're camouflaged like these guys. If you erase the tire tracks and make it look like you're just a black hole in the world, there's nothing there but natural vegetation. If you make a cell phone call from that area, guess what? You've just ratted out all that effort that you've gone through is for waste. So yeah, that's something to consider. So one must remember that movement, we're not just talking about a moving target versus a static target. We're talking moving from to and from a hide site is what bags most people most of the time, especially when it comes to vehicles and vehicle traffic. So, and also the radio call thing, radio traffic from a unique area like a grove of trees, a very, if there's a field and there's one tree in it, and I detected a radio transmission coming from a field, guess where? I'm going to go to that tree because I would guarantee there's an antenna strung up in it. So that is why number 5 is so important. And then lastly, this image is kind of a departure from the military doctrine, but this is a screenshot from an incident that occurred back in, I think, March of this year, March of 2020. I might be mistaken on that one, but this is a drone that is operated by the New York Police Department. And this drone, depending on which story you believe or what officially is publicly available, basically what happened is this drone captured this kid or this guy practicing airsoft tactics on his roof, and they dispatched a team to come arrest him. And he was arrested using this drone footage. So that is a huge concern. So number 6 and number 7, while they are, military oriented to, 6 is post air guards and 7 is to plan to operate under UAS. For the military, what that means is, hey, be aware of what's going on. Be aware if there's a UAS in the area. Be prepared to either continue mission regardless of it, or take measures to take it down. Now, obviously, that's a little bit easier said than done in the military sphere, but so adapting this to civilians is not exactly an easy thing to do. But one must remember, if you're going to be doing anything outside in an area that has persistent surveillance, don't do anything that is firearms related. There is already a slew of AI type software out there that can detect the shape of a firearm and hone in on that. Even YouTube itself has this. I'm wondering if this video is going to get flagged at some point and taken down because we have shown this particular image of a firearm. So this will be very interesting to see. But we also have to remember hostile activities. That is a huge thing as well, because what is hostile? Well, to me, a dude practicing airsoft stuff on the roof, not necessarily hostile. It's interesting to look at, and I would freely admit if I was a drone operator and I saw this in New York City, I wouldn't be inquisitive. But if the dude just looks like he's training, whatever, it's just training. If I saw this at a gun range, I would not be surprised at all, right? But if you're in an area where that kind of thing is frowned upon, or remember how the whole COVID thing went down, they were using drones to track down people in public parks. That might be a hostile. Your mere presence might be a hostile activity and sort of, consent to search, really. So these are scary technologies, and our laws are kind of wacky right now. So that's something to keep in mind, really. And there's a whole slew of electronic countermeasures out there for the military. There's not so many for civilians, and there's no electronic countermeasure for a drone for civilians that is legal that we know of. Because jamming in any form is currently illegal under U.S. law. So we can't really talk about those electronic countermeasures just yet, but we can say they are out there. So if you want to do your own research, go ahead. Really, one of the last points we wanted to make is one of the ones which is on the list, which is to inspect your signature from the enemy's POV. And that's why we wanted to put this out, because one of the to us, when we read this statement, we read training. Training is key, and this is where either getting your own drone or having some kind of technology, having a buddy come try to find you, right? That's going to be super important in the coming days, weeks, months, years, right? So that kind of thing, it cannot be understated. I cannot tell you how many times people who think they have, have done really good camouflage stuff. They've deployed 5 or 6 times, but when you get them out there and they're having to hide from drones too, it's a different scenario, right? So, when you're deploying to Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, you don't have to build an observation post or a COP or something like that has to be camouflaged from the air, because your adversaries don't have drones, at least not in anything, significant, right? It's not like you're having to camouflage it like, from bombers or anything like that. But here at home, you might have to. So that's the number one thing is, we're hiding from drones on our own soil, essentially. So having the ability to train, being able to check your own signature, make sure your camouflage works, that is vital. So, just to remind everyone of this often repeated quote of, the more you train in peace, the less you bleed in war. So that is very, very true. And even if that war is an information war, so, the more you train in an information war, the less you bleed, the less information you bleed. So that's why we wanted to put this video out solely for this last one here, to encourage people to get training as much as possible and do the best you can. Because really the goal here is to be hard to kill. That's the really main goal here for everything that we do, is to be a little bit harder to kill than the next guy. I don't think that it takes, for a lot of people, it was a wake-up call to see a modern day tank get blasted into oblivion, to see a modern day helicopter, a modern day fighter jet get shot down. That stuff was very sobering for people, and that's good because it encourages people to be harder to kill, and hopefully we can encourage that a little bit as well. Yeah, hopefully this video was helpful. Leave us a like, comment, subscribe below, do all that jazz, all usual normal stuff, so that we can make it through YouTube's algorithms and let our content be seen by a lot of people. If you want to download this video, you can on LBRY.TV, like I mentioned, link of which is below. Hope if YouTube still allows us to link stuff. But yeah, so that's there. Like I said, we're going to have a lot more content coming out about this sort of camouflage topic, particularly when it comes to thermal camouflage, and how that goes. We've also got a lot of other videos planned, but we wanted to put this one out quickly because of the reasons we've stated. It's very, very important to start training now. So if you've got an idea for an episode, drop us a line. Go ahead and hit us up on any of our platforms, Keybase, email, you name it, we have it. Link up with us there if you've got a question. We'll throw it in for question time. We have a whole podcast series where if you have any questions, shoot them to us in our inbox, DM them to us on Instagram or whatever platform, and we'll do a podcast episode where we answer everybody's questions, which has been quite fun for us to do. So we really enjoy that and we want to continue it. So if you've got any questions, drop them below. We'll throw them in our question time podcast episode. And yeah, we'll have more of this content coming to you very, very soon. So you guys know it. Be harder to kill, fight in the shade, and we'll see you next time. S2 Actual out.